Okay, so I was I am and was the project lead for the Write Review tool. And so this was developed at the Knowledge Translation Program at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. Today's session, I will be describing how and when to use the Write Review tool, including a few limitations and going through some worked examples. I'm then going to explain the development process of the Write Review tool and how the tool is evaluated. And then I'll end by describing the upcoming update of the tool. Before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge the Write Review team. You might recognize some faces, but it truly was a team effort, so I just wanted to make sure I acknowledged our team. So to begin, I wanted to ask you all a few questions using Mentimeter. So if you wouldn't mind logging on to menti.com, you can either scan the QR code on your phone or just log on to the website on your laptops, and then you'll have to add in the voting code, which is 3670-3616. Okay. We'll go with the first question. So how do you choose which knowledge synthesis method to use? So this is an open answer question. So if you could just type in your response, I'll give everyone a few moments to do that. And there are no right or wrong answers. Okay, thank you, Carol. So you mentioned in the chat using research questions or objectives. And if it's easier, feel free to just type it into the chat if you're more comfortable with that. Okay, so one person said they're not quite sure, depending on the research question. Oh, someone has actually used the Write Review tool. Okay, that's great. And to answer the person's question, referring to what method would you, how would you go about selecting a knowledge synthesis method? So for example, how would you decide about when to choose a systematic review versus a scoping review? But for the sake of time, thank you so much for those who provided some answers. I'm just going to go on to the next question. Okay, so some of you have already filled this in, perfect. So most people have never used the tool, which is great. Hopefully you'll learn more about the tool and consider using it in the future. And a few of you have used it already. So I hope you still learn something from today's presentation. So from the Mentimeter, you could see that there were different responses for how people go about selecting how to choose which knowledge synthesis method to use. And this leads in nicely to why we actually developed Write Review. So there are lots of knowledge synthesis methods out there, which can make it challenging and overwhelming to decide which one to use. So our team set out to simplify the selection process by developing a tool that was user-friendly and easy to use. So what exactly is Write Review? Write Review is an open access web-based decision support tool, and its purpose is to help users select which of the 41 included quantitative or qualitative knowledge synthesis methods would be appropriate for their research question. The process is fairly simple. The user will answer a series of questions, and then the tool will recommend some methods, including relevant guidance and examples, all in one convenient place. And this tool can be used by anyone who's interested in conducting a knowledge synthesis, and it's especially useful for those who are undertaking a review for the first time or those unfamiliar with the range of knowledge synthesis methods. So I'm now going to describe how and when to actually use the tool. And I thought to demonstrate how the tool works, I would walk through a couple of case scenarios in real time, and we'll use the tool in real time. So we'll start with a quantitative review example. So in scenario one, a researcher is interested in understanding the effectiveness of social prescribing among older adults within a primary care setting. They know they need to conduct some type of review, but are unsure of which method to use. So the researcher has outlined their PICOs. So P stands for population, which is studies with group mean age 60 plus or years in this case. Intervention is any intervention involving social prescribing. The comparator is any comparator or no intervention. The outcomes are physical and psychosocial outcomes and health resource use. And finally, study design are experimental and observational studies. So now we're ready to go into the tool and see how this all works. Okay, so when you log into our tool, you will see this here, and you'll be asked to select the type of review. So because we're interested in effectiveness, we're going to select quantitative. So you'll see here that there are 5 questions for the quantitative branch of the tool. And something to note is if you require guidance when using this tool, we have an explanation and elaboration document, which is a fulsome PDF of examples and further description of what we mean by the question, as well as the answer response. And you can also use the tooltips, which are these question mark icons. They're either after the question or after the answer response. And again, that can be used to help guide your responses. So the first question is, what is your goal or objective? So because we know that our research question is about the effectiveness of social prescribing interventions, we're going to select the first response. The second question is, if your review is about interventions or diagnostic tests, how many? If you're not sure what this is referring to, you can click this tooltip. And so this question is referring to the number of interventions that will be involved in your review questions and is only relevant if your answer to question 1 is A or E. So because we selected 1A, this question is relevant to us, and we're just doing comparisons between no intervention or any other intervention. So we're going to select 2. And then we'll move on to the next question, which is what type of evidence will you be using? So we'll select primary studies. Question number 4, what type of analysis will you conduct? We will select quantitative synthesis. And do you have time and or resource constraints? And we're going to say no in this case. We're going to pretend that we have all the time and money to do this. And once you're satisfied with your answers, you're going to go ahead and press submit. So the suggested method is a systematic review of the effectiveness and or safety of interventions with meta-analysis if appropriate. So this plus button will expand the section, and by pressing the minus button will collapse it. So you have the opportunity to view your answers. And then you also will have the definition of the method that was recommended. So in this case, systematic review. And you'll have a list of all the important conduct and reporting guidance links. And the same for if you're able to do a meta-analysis, depending on what data you have. Again, you'll have the definition and conduct and reporting guidance. And we have a list of several open access, highly cited examples. So if you're doing this type of review for the first time, you can look to these to see how it was done by another research group. And if you're interested in viewing the logic of the tool, which in this case, just taking a moment, is a decision tree, you can view that here. I won't go into too much detail about this now because I will discuss it later on in the presentation. And then finally, if you're interested in providing feedback, you can complete this optional survey here. And we do actually use this information to improve our tool. And because we are having an update coming up probably next year, this information will be super valuable to us. So please feel free to provide your feedback using that link. And a couple other things I wanted to mention is we have this tab here, knowledge synthesis methods. So this actually includes all of the methods that are included in our tool, and it provides you with a description, key guidelines, and examples of the methodology in use. And this is for both quantitative and qualitative methods. And also, if there are any terms that you're unfamiliar with, you can use this glossary of terms. So I'm going to go back into my slide so we can go through the next example. So the next example is, as you can probably guess, is a qualitative review example. And in this scenario, a master's student is interested in quality of life research. After doing a quick review of the literature, they found that many quality of life definitions and theories have been proposed, but the older adult perspective in quality of life is lacking. The student has asked an academic librarian for some help on how to approach the research question. And the research question is, what does quality of life mean to older adults? So in this case, they're using the SPICE framework. So S is for setting, which is Western countries in this case, perspective, older adults living at home. Intervention or phenomenon of interest is quality of life perceptions. There will be no comparisons, and the evaluation would be qualitative methodology. So now we can go back into the tool knowing this information. So now we're going back into the tool, and because we know we're interested in qualitative studies, we're going to select the qualitative button. And you can see here that there are 10 questions in this case. And you can see here that we have a prompt that we recommend that you conduct a preliminary search to gain background information on the relevant literature. And this is because some of the questions require you to have general knowledge of the literature that you're interested in. And if you didn't have that background, you likely would not be able to adequately answer the questions. So thinking back to our case example, the first question is your review question fixed or likely to be emergent? So in this case, we're going to select fix because we did use our SPICE framework. Number 2, who is your primary audience? Select all that apply. So I think that this would apply to researchers, potentially practitioners, and people in the public. Number 3, how are you planning to contribute to existing knowledge by doing the review? Because there isn't a lot of knowledge on this topic, we really want to do a synthesis. So we're going to select that. Moving on to question 4. Will the likely included articles contain sufficient detail regarding the role of theory within your planned review? We're going to say yes, because we know that there's a lot of theory out there on quality of life, just not specifically on quality of life perception in older adults. And will the likely included studies contain sufficient supporting detail to understand the study context? So this is asking if there will be information beyond what works. So for example, there'd be information about how it works, why it works, things like that. And we're going to say no in this case. Question 6, what type of sampling method do you plan to use? We want to look at all of the eligible studies, so we're going to say comprehensive coverage. And similarly, how many studies do you plan to review? We're going to say a large number of studies. And for question 8, will your review be limited by any time or resource constraints? We'll go ahead and say no. Number 9, will your review team include members with experience in knowledge synthesis? So because this is a master's student, we're going to assume that they have committee members who do have experience in knowledge synthesis, so we'll go ahead and say yes. And then for 10, will your review team include members with expertise in qualitative research? So again, because they have committee members, we're going to say yes. Once you've filled in all the answers, then you're going to go ahead and press submit. And so in this case, you can see that we were actually recommended more than one method. So it's up to the user at this point to go through all of the information that's provided here on the results page to figure out which would be the best approach given their research questions and their overall research topic. And one thing that is different from the quantitative branch is that we actually use a scoring scheme. So you'll see there's a score here of 8.33. And you can see here we have expected answers based on what would be expected for concept analysis in comparison to the given answers. So anything that's highlighted in blue in this column indicates that there was a match. And so I'll go into a bit more detail about how the scoring scheme works, but essentially you sum up the scores and then you come up with whatever method matches that. All right, so I will go back into my slide. All right, so now that we know how the tool works, I'm going to talk about when you should use the tool. So, of course, when you plan to conduct a knowledge synthesis, or if you're unsure of or want to verify which methodology to use. But I also want to emphasize that it's not just a tool to gain methods recommendation, but it's also a place where you can review a list of the most common knowledge synthesis methodologies for both quantitative and qualitative reviews. And you can view key conduct and reporting guidelines, descriptions, and examples of methodologies in use. And I mentioned all of this information is housed in the Knowledge Synthesis Methods tab. And there's some key things that I just want users to keep in mind before using the tool. So as I mentioned, it's really important to have a sense of the literature on the topic of interest by conducting either a literature review or environmental scan. You should also have a research question in mind. And as you saw as we work through these examples, a research question is needed to answer the questions. You should establish some sort of PICOS or related framework. This can, again, be a preliminary version, but just something to help guide you to answer the questions. And finally, you should read through all of the questions. And this is just to ensure that you have enough information about your planned knowledge synthesis to adequately answer the questions. And I wanted to share that there are a few limitations of the Right Review tool. So the first is that it is only available in English. It does not include an exhaustive list of methods. Rather, it includes the most commonly used methods. And as you saw in our second example, you may receive more than one suggested method. And so again, it's up to the user to read through their supporting materials and determine which method they should proceed with, keeping the research question in mind and the objectives of the research. And this is just a reminder that the tool is intended to serve as a general guide to help reviewers think through what methods would be useful and appropriate for their studies. So now that we know how the tool works and when to use it, I'm going to talk about the development of the Right Review tool. And I just wanted to mention, if you're interested in more details outside of what I shared today, we did publish on the development process in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology. So there were 4 phases. The first was designing the tool. The second was conducting usability testing. The third was disseminating the tool. And the fourth was evaluating the real-world use of the tool. And just a note that the evaluation only includes data from the initial version of the tool, which only had the quantitative component, and the tool had been disseminated for about a year at this point. Before I go into the details, I wanted to provide an overview of the overall architecture of the tool, which was designed as a simple expert system. So you can see here on the slide that there are 4 main components, which are the inputs, the inference engine, the knowledge base, and the outputs. For the inputs, or what the user actually puts into the tool, they're stratified according to whether users wish to synthesize findings from quantitative or qualitative studies. For reviews of quantitative studies, users are required to complete 5 questions and 10 questions for reviews of qualitative studies. The inference engine matches the user's responses to the attributes of the 41 included knowledge synthesis methods to generate the methodological recommendations. The knowledge base is what informs the inference engine and is composed of 6 sources, which are listed on this slide. And finally, the output. So this is what the tool presents on the results page, which includes the recommended method along with the related guidance and examples. So now we'll dive into a little deeper about phase 1, designing the tool. So I'm going to start with the quantitative studies. So the questions were informed by a framework of different knowledge synthesis types by Go et al., as well as methods guidance and knowledge synthesis expertise on our team. The question type is multiple choice, but you're selecting only one answer. And the logic of the tool was a decision tree, which essentially matches the user's inputs with attributes of the knowledge synthesis methods. So this is really how the back end of the tool works. And you can see here that the tree node represents a tool question, the branch represents the user's answer to the question, and the leaf node represents the recommended method, which in this case is a scoping review. Moving on to qualitative studies, the questions were informed by a scoping review, a structured methodology review, methods guidance, and qualitative evidence synthesis expertise among our team members. The question types were a combination of multiple choice, selecting only one response, as well as select all that apply. So you're probably thinking that it might be a little more complicated in terms of the logic of the tool, and so we ended up using a scoring scheme, which you saw in the examples. And basically, the scoring scheme was designed to measure the extent to which users' responses match the attributes of different knowledge synthesis methods. So for single response questions, a score of 1 or 0 was assigned depending on whether or not it was an exact match or a non-match. And then multiple responses were given a partial score, and it was assigned by comparing user responses with expected answers. And then the scores were summed, and the method with the largest score is recommended. But as you saw, there can be instances where there's more than one recommendation. And in that case, any methods that were within 0.5 of the highest score would also be recommended. So I'm now going to move on to phase 2, which was usability testing. We performed 3 sequential phases to refine the components of the tool. The first phase was phase validity. So we wanted to capture, are the questions and answers actually valid? In phase 2, this was really focused on the logic of the tool. So do the combination of responses match with the attributes of the recommended methods? And then phase 3 was focused on fit for purpose. So do the recommended methods meet the expectations of reviewers with expertise and experience in knowledge synthesis conduct? Is the tool easy to use? And can you break the tool? So this is referred to as adversary testing. And for phases 1 and 3, participants use case studies to review the questions and answers, as well as to test the tool. And in phase 3, this was our development team. We tested the decision tree as well as the scoring scheme, and then analyzed the results and made modifications from there. Now, in terms of dissemination, we use conventional dissemination strategies, which included shared announcements on internal websites, as well as on internal and external organizational websites, and emails to diverse knowledge users within our extended networks. We also did a social media campaign on LinkedIn and Twitter, so something a little bit different from what we traditionally do. And then moving on to phase 4. So the goal was really to evaluate the real world use of the tool, and the evaluation was led by a member of the team who was not directly involved in the tool's development. The RE-AIM framework was used, and it consists of 5 constructs that help evaluators assess outcomes. So for the tool, the constructs were conceptualized in the following ways. So for reach, it was really about the representation and the number of individuals who use the tool. Effectiveness refers to the impact of the tool on real-world practice. Adoption refers to the organizations that use the tool in their settings. Number 4, implementation, so how well the tool was put into real-world use. And I have an asterisk here to just note that this construct was adapted to reflect the process of disseminating the tool, with a focus on developing new ways to share the tool and also leveraging existing channels. And then finally, maintenance. This was referring to the sustainability of the tool use and maintaining effectiveness of outcomes. So in terms of our evaluation results, data was collected during the first year of public release from an online voluntary survey embedded in the tool, as well as analytics from Twitter and Google. For reach, so as of October 2020, 4,673 people use the tool worldwide, mostly in North America and Europe. And now, as of this month, October 2023, over 40,000 people have used the tool. For effectiveness, so of the 4,673 users, only 36 people completed the survey. Although we acknowledge the low completion rate, the survey was still a valuable way to elicit feedback and evaluate perceived effectiveness. All respondents found the tool easy to use, and over 90% found that the tool had a clear purpose. Questions were easy to understand. Descriptions of knowledge synthesis methods were also perceived as adequate. 83% found the explanation and elaboration guide helpful, but some respondents did note that they didn't even realize that it was there, as well as the tooltips. So the open-ended questions were really helpful. So we improved the visibility and accessibility of both the explanation and elaboration guide, as well as the tooltips, to really ensure that they were being used and were helpful for users. And it also, the open-ended questions helped us to understand how the tool supported respondents in their work. So several people mentioned that it verified their selection, and many librarians were actually using the tool to help patrons figure out which method to use, which was a great finding. Next was adoption. So we assessed adoption using data on users' roles, organizational affiliations, and methods of tool access. Most users access the tool through a direct link, but many users also accessed it from referral websites, such as library service websites on academic institution websites. Moving on to implementation. So again, given that we actively disseminated the tool but did not implement it at an organizational level, we use the implementation construct to evaluate our dissemination. Our 5-week social media campaign through Twitter appeared to be an effective dissemination strategy. We found that over the weeks, our 8 Twitter posts received a combined 27,368 impressions, 1,286 total engagements, 599 link clicks, 218 likes, and 132 retweets. And finally, moving on to maintenance. On average, about 236 users per month were accessing the tool, and this was over 14 months post-dissemination. And our Google Analytics data indicated that the tool continued to be shared through library services and social networking, which really speaks to the fact that the initial dissemination led to the diffusion of the tool. If you're interested in learning more about the evaluation or development, again, you can refer to our publication in the Journal of Clinical Epidemiology. So now I'm going to discuss our upcoming update of the Write Review tool, which I think is very exciting. And so the slides I'm going to be sharing are adapted from Dr. Barbara Klein, who really led the Delphi process for this update. And to give you some background context, the research group from Ireland obtained peer review funding to conduct an international modified Delphi process on the tool. And the aim was to integrate the qualitative and quantitative questions into a single set of questions. The methods for this was a modified e-Delphi, where the items were generated from the existing tool, so tool questions, the evidence synthesis definitions, as well as the tool outputs. There were 2 online rounds using WellP, which is just a Delphi platform. And relevant stakeholders were invited to rate each item for importance or clarity. And by that, we mean to what extent the item was important in deciding which review to conduct and the clarity of the definitions of reviews and current tool output elements. The agreement was set at 70% a priori. So this is how they defined high agreement in the Delphi. And after 2 rounds, all outstanding items were discussed by the project steering committee. This is just an overview of the participants. So 80 participants were invited. 24 panel members completed all sections of round 1, and 12 completed all sections of round 2. Completers were mainly researchers with 1 patient representative. Most had lots of experience with evidence synthesis, and the majority had not used the tool before. To summarize across the different Delphi rounds, 21 of 46 items reached high agreement in round 1, with 3 new items suggested from comments. So this meant that 27 items were presented in round 2, with 8 that were agreed on. Therefore, 19 items were left for discussion by the project steering committee. Of these 19, 10 had minor edits, 6 items were disaggregated or merged, and 3 were excluded. This resulted in a final tool with 9 guiding questions, 25 review types and approaches, and 8 tool outputs. So our original tool had 2 branches, which were the 5 quantitative and then the 10 qualitative questions. And so the project steering committee combined these into 14 guiding questions for presentation in the Delphi, resulting in a combined set of 9 guiding questions, which you see here on the slide. And by combining the 2 branches into a single set of questions, this eliminates the need for the user to know whether or not they wish to do a quantitative or qualitative knowledge synthesis. Each of these questions, similar to the pre-existing tool, have a series of questions to select from, which are not presented here. Questions 1 to 7 relate to the specific methodological considerations, while questions 8 and 9 differentiate between approaches such as rapid or living. And here's an overview of the definition agreement by round. So in the first box, which is round 1, 11 definitions were agreed upon out of the proposed 27. And as highlighted with bolding, most of these were more established quantitative review types, as you can see, for example, systematic reviews and diagnostic accuracy systematic reviews. And then looking at the next box, round 2, more qualitative reviews were agreed in round 2. However, a lot of qualitative reviews reached no agreement and ended up being discussed by the project steering committee. And so you can see in the last box, this resulted in edits to text, disaggregating 1 item into 2, merging 2 items, and excluding 1 item. And then in terms of the tool output, the original items were all retained, and there were 3 new items proposed by the Delphi panel. All items will actually be included in the update, except for the last one, which has the asterisks. This will actually be tackled in future work, which I'm going to describe in the next slide. So currently the update is ongoing, and we will be including more methods, which is very exciting, such as mixed methods, realist reviews, and systematic reviews of outcome measurement instruments. We got a lot of feedback from users for the inclusion of realist reviews and mixed methods in particular. So hopefully this will expand the use of the tool as well. And there's an exciting new initiative, the Evidence Synthesis Taxonomy Initiative, and this is building on the Right Review prototype and will likely be synergistic with future updates of the Right Review tool. This initiative really aims to establish a living taxonomy of evidence syntheses and has the potential to standardize terminology in this space. And if you're interested in reading a bit more about that, there's a publication by Dr. Zachary Munn and colleagues, and I've linked it here on the slide. And that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. I just wanted to acknowledge the Right Review team, Dr. Barbara Klein, Drs. Andrea Trucco and Ba Pham for their input, and finally to Carol and Triprian for inviting me to present today. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Great. So since do people want to actually ask their questions in person? I mean, it might be a bit more, we just do it informally this time. If not, I can ask, there is a question in the chat.
I used to develop artificial intelligence applications many years ago, and I'm kind of curious if you used a software package to run all your rules and your decision tree behind the scenes, and if so, what that software package is.
Oh, thank you for that question. I wish we had used an AI package. We actually didn't. So for some context, this was developed a couple of years ago. But with the emergence of AI, that would be something that we would be interested in potentially exploring a bit further. But for the update, we are using R to figure out all the different potential combinations and then developing the logic of the tool from there.
Oh, also, I have to say that it's really amazing how well this project was run and all the different things you considered and how you considered them and measured them. Because when I was trying to do this for the government, I was doing it all by myself, and there weren't really the tools at the time back in the 1980s to do everything that you've done. But I'll say that it's really kind of amazing to me to see.
Oh, thank you so much for that feedback. That's so great to hear. Yeah, it truly was a team effort. I can't say that I did this alone, but I would love to get your feedback. So if you want to connect with me via email, or if you want to fill out the form, the evaluation form, I'd love to get your thoughts since you have experience and it seems like you tried to explore this yourself.
Yeah, so actually, I was thinking too, like about the evidence synthesis taxonomy group and how, your work really feeds into that and the synergy between it. So how do you believe that you're going to like going forward? How like if they make changes to the taxonomy, which I think is like an ongoing rolling, process, how will you like integrate their results into the tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Carol. That's something that we're in the process of figuring out. As we know, this field is constantly changing. There's always new things coming out. So that is one of the biggest challenges with this tool is how to continually keep it updated. So the great thing about the new initiative is that it will be living. So they're hoping to continually be able to update it, sort of like a living wiki is how they put it in the paper. So we'll need to discuss further how exactly that would apply into the tool. How could we include this more living aspect? So as I believe your name is Mott, as Mott mentioned, perhaps exploring AI techniques may be something that we look into.
I do have another question that I thought of. When you were collecting the rules that you're going to use to compile your decision tree, uh, was that entirely based on published works you did, or did you also do interviews with subject matter experts where you did kind of like a knowledge acquisition process from interviewing experts also? And if you mainly did it based on extracting facts from articles, did you have any kind of software tools to assist you in extracting the information and rules from those articles?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. So we used existing framework. So the Gao et al. Framework. So it looked at three key dimensions of how review types may differ. So that was the basis for the quantitative. We did also have a lot of experts on our team, and we did really extensive testing with international experts in knowledge synthesis, but also with varying levels of expertise and experience with knowledge synthesis. So we had novice reviewers, people who've never done it or only did one knowledge synthesis, all the way to people who had 5+ years. So that combination, as well as literature, really allowed us to hone in on what the key components are and then how to then develop the decision tree. And then we did a similar process for the qualitative branch of the tool as well. We just use different frameworks. So Dr. Andrew Booth has had two frameworks for qualitative evidence synthesis. So that was more of the basis. And then again, using expertise from different methodologists as well as varying expertise in evidence synthesis.
So Krystle, what's the next steps? Like I know you've done this new user testing and so what are your plans for the next, like, say 6 months or a year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, we're in the process of developing the new logic for the tool now that we have the combined set of questions, which will honestly be the bulk of the work. So I foresee that happening for the next several months. And then from there, we'll actually dive in and start creating a new version of the tool. We're including quite a few more methods as well. So there'll be a lot of collaboration with different researchers and scientists to figure out what are the best guidance and examples that we can include. And then again, really extensive testing because we're including more methods which require more questions and answer responses to consider. And then hopefully by sometime next year, we'll be able to launch the new version of the tool.
I have an idea for the website. I didn't get a chance to look at the tool a lot, but it might help if you had a button on the tool where a user could submit a comment or a feature request, so that way you could get ideas from users on the fly before they forgot about them.
I am writing that down because I think that is great. I'll definitely bring that back to the team and see what their thoughts are on that. Thank you so much.
Yes, I've seen buttons like that used in some of the newer search engines that use large language models that are developing their platforms as a way for them to gather feedback from their users while they're figuring out and prioritizing what features to focus on in their software development.
Yeah, no, that's thank you for sharing that. I'll definitely bring that back to the team.
What were the examples of some that had those user feedback, like databases?
Oh, well, they weren't databases. They were large language models, search engines. I can't remember for sure which ones had them, but some of those types of search engines that I've looked at are ones like Elicit, ELICIT, and SciSpace, SciSpace. There's another search engine like that, Zeta, ZETA, Alpha. I don't know if it had a suggestion button like that, but there are quite a few of these neural search engines that have come out recently and that are under development.
Oh, great, thank you. I don't know those last two, so I'll check those out.
Well, the SciSpace is well for both SciSpace and Elicit, and for the other one, Zeta Alpha, you can find short tutorial videos on them on YouTube on how to use them, but some of them, like especially the SciSpace one, offers some very interesting features where they kind of give you an automatic summary of an article, and they also allow you to chat using a chat GPT type interface where you can do interactive questions and answers about articles that you want to focus your attention on. So they might be a way of also gathering research materials quickly for your project in terms of future ways you might want to extend it.
Yeah, no, thank you for all these amazing ideas.
Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna look them up too, actually. I love like learning about new programs that are coming out there and like how they're like designing them and stuff. So yeah, very useful.
Well, yes, these new search engines that are integrated with large language models allow you a lot more flexibility in doing your search because you can ask your search query more in something like a natural language sentence rather than having to know the precise keywords to get the information that you want.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I know that Elicit uses like a model where, you put in one and then it's able to generate more relevant articles based on the one that you're kind of selecting. So that's really helpful. Anybody else have questions? All right. Well, I'd like to thank Krystle. It was really great. I love like the tool is just amazing. Like it's not only, useful for people out there, but it's also like it's a great learning tool, I think, for anybody like wanting to know more about like what type of systematic review might be, the best for your research questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. Hope to see you next time.